Welcome, everyone, to episode 4 of my podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I'm also so glad that we've made it to 4 episodes so far, and we're just going to keep trudging along. So, we're going to talk about sort of this Isle of Man tournament that's going on. It's called the FIDE Grand Swiss. It is located at the Isle of Man, which is an island. I believe it's near the United Kingdom or something like that. And the intrigue behind the FIDE Grand Swiss is that not only is it just a super strong tournament with Fabiano playing, Hikaru playing, Firouzja, Anish Giri, just big names like that, and possibly the reason why these big names are playing is there are 2 candidate spots on the line. Not one, there are 2 candidate spots. So you just have to finish in the top 2. Or it depends, because there are a few people who are qualified. I believe Fabiano's already qualified and he's playing, so you might only have to make the top 3, but nonetheless, there are 2 candidate spots on the line, and so the candidates tournament, the FIDE candidates tournament, is ultimately the tournament that decides who gets to challenge the defending world champion for the world championship title. And I don't know, this cycle is going to be especially interesting. I think I maybe talked about it in the first episode, to where there may not be as much intrigue as there used to be, but I also do think the current world champion, who is no longer Magnus Carlsen, is much more vulnerable than the world champion who has been Magnus Carlsen is in the past. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Like, let's say, I don't know, Fabiano Caruana, well, he has his candidate spot. So let's say he wins the candidates and plays in the world championship match. Well, it's kind of weird. Like, Ding has just been MIA since he won the world championship. He played one more tournament, like, I think immediately after that. And then he's just, we don't know where he's been. So is he going to defend his title? I would assume so. Maybe he just has personal stuff. I know he's been to law school in the past, so maybe he's working on that or something like that. Maybe he's like, I'm world champion now, I'm not going to stress too much about defending my title. Maybe he's like, he'll do it, but not going to stress too much about it. So it'll be interesting to see if there's more turnover as far as the world champion goes. So are we going to stay at 17 world champions, or are we going to have an 18th world champion? Will that be Fabiano? Will Jan Nepomniachtchi finally sort of get that monkey off his back and win a world championship title? Will Hikaru make it? Will Alireza Firouzja make it? Who knows? There's a lot of variants. Could Magnus, accept his invite? Probably not. But anywho, let's go ahead and talk about the FIDE Grand Swiss. So it's a super strong Swiss. It's not an open tournament, to be clear. I believe 114 players are given an invite. They just invite the top 100 players by rating, and obviously not everyone's going to accept it, so they have protocols in play for if someone declines or whatnot. And then I think there's just some random, interzonal spots, maybe some wild cards who go in and things like that. So it's a Swiss tournament with 114 players, and so the pairings. So if you really follow chess and you, for example, Qatar Masters just a week or 2 ago, in round 1, the top GMs, Magnus, Hikaru, they got, I'm going to say easy pairings. Maybe for them it's easy, but obviously, I think Magnus got an IM, Hikaru got a WGM in round 1, if I'm mistaken. Because if you remember, that watch controversy came in round 2. Magnus had won round 1, and round 2 he was still paired down against a 2500 Grandmaster. However, round 1 in the FIDE Grand Swiss is no easy feat for these players. Hikaru was held to a draw in round 1 against Rasmus something. I forget his name. He's a very strong GM. Fabiano had to play Ivan Saric, I believe. Alireza Firouzja was paired against Ruslan Ponomariov, I believe, who's a former FIDE world champion. I just happen to remember these pairings. I'm not reading them out or anything like that. But that sort of goes to say that you're not necessarily guaranteed to get some quick start. I mean, actually, I can probably just look at some of these round 1 results and just see if there's anything. So yeah, Fabiano beat Ivan Saric, who's 2650, so very solid Grandmaster. Hikaru was held to a draw. Firouzja was held to a draw. Anish Giri was held to a draw. Gukesh was held to a draw. Rapport was held to a draw. Aronian won, and this is back in round 1. We're on round 2 now, so we'll sort of get to that in a second. MVL was held to a draw. Jean-Christophe Duda was held to a draw. Yu Yang Yi won. Okay, so good for him. But you see that these guys in round 1, they're not getting easy pairings. Like, a 2750 is not supposed to just railroad a 2650. So it's just been interesting to see. And it'll be interesting to see how that sort of goes into play when the tournament ends. Like, what I'm talking about is, I'm just trying to form my thoughts as I'm doing this, but will it have mattered if you got off to a hot or slow start from the beginning? Will the winner maybe have like drawn the first game and then gone on to win? That actually does make me curious. I'm going to look up the results from last year, because I know that Ali Reza Firouzja won first and Fabiano won second. How did they start? So Firouzja started with a win. He beat... Oh, I think I remember looking at this. He beat Najat Abasov, who probably back then was a nobody, but remember, he's the guy who had this amazing run at the World Cup and just ran into Magnus Carlsen, and Magnus is probably going to forfeit his candidate spot, so this Abasov guy is going to be in the candidates. And then then in round 2, he beat Darius Wirtz, 2650 Grandmaster from the United States. And then he won his third game against Alexander Predke. This field from 2021 doesn't look as strong as it is today. I don't think it is, honestly. So maybe it's just harder this time around. Let's see, Fabiano a year ago, he beat Maxim Chigachev in round 1, who's a 2639 from Russia. In round 2, he was held to a draw against Nihal Sarin, who's, very young, rising up the ranks. Then he was held to, is that 3 draws in a row, I see? Oh, yeah, Fabiano didn't even tie for first. He tied for second. There was a 2-way tie for second between Fabiano Caruana and Grigory Oparin. Who's 2650, goes to St. Louis University, if I'm not mistaken. I've actually played him, fun fact. Not over the board, but Collegiate Rapid Championship a year ago, I was paired against him on board 1 and just got destroyed. I remember it was kind of funny because he played a Rui Lopez, but then he played like Knight C3, and I was like, does she normally like move the C pawn? But then he had his bishop on G5, Knight D5, and just destroyed me. So that was definitely very interesting. But all that to say, it doesn't look like you're required to have some fast start in order to win. Looks like Fabiano had 3 draws in a row. Like, he won the first game, and then he had 3 draws in a row, and then still managed to finish tied for second. So we'll see how it plays out. Then obviously some results in round 2. The big one that I think had everyone on the edge of their seats, Fabiano Caruana crushed Hans Niemann. Okay, crush is strong. I think Hans just made some mistakes, and Fabiano sort of got what he wanted. Although I was actually thinking about, because I was looking at, I think both Fabiano and Hikaru, they sort of had like recaps, so I was watching that in preparation for this, and Hans played the Berlin, which he apparently doesn't do much, which I more than respect, just like trying to throw someone like Fabiano off of their opening preparation and just playing their own thing. I don't know. I'm just not sure that the Berlin is the opening to do that, because it's so well studied. And, I mean, you gotta think that Fabiano has these lines against it. And, I mean, it was an equal position. I actually like what Fabiano did with his D5 push. So after takes D5, he just got knight takes D5. So you got this very good knight with, like, a potentially backwards pawn on D6. And if Hans ever trades on D5, then... Well, that did happen, actually. He just plays queen takes. And so, all that to say, I was impressed with how Fabiano just had an equal position, but was able to find some imbalance to cling onto. And then Hans sort of blundered with queen a6, which allows the rook trade. And then basically his back rank was loose. So you can obviously look up the game if you need to. I'm not trying to do too much blindfold analysis, but Fabiano won the first game, or won both of his games. Sorry, guys. If it seems like I'm out of energy or sputtering my words or whatnot, it is late, 11:33. I should try to be in bed within half an hour. So I did want to make sure to get this podcast episode out. So, anywho, Fabiano won. Let's see other results. Rapport and Bakro drew. Aronian drew. Also, Hikaru drew. Hikaru's opponent played an Alpine Sicilian. By the way, Hikaru was black against Ronak Sadhwani. I think that's how you say it. Although that's probably not the case. I kind of figured that was going to be a tough pairing for him. I think in Qatar, Hikaru also had black at some point early against Parham Magsudlu. As you know, having black against some young, ambitious player, that's just going to be very difficult. I mean, I trust Hikaru almost more than anyone to be able to do something positively with that, but Hikaru is held to do 2 draws, and I think it's going to be interesting. It's one of the main storylines as it pertains to the Isle of Man tournament. Not only is it just the 2 candidate spots up for grabs based on finishing first or second, but there's also the rating spot that's up for grabs. Now, I would be lying if I told you I knew exactly how the rating spots work. I think it's some weighted average from like the past 12 months up until a certain point or something like that. That's my educated guess based on what I've heard / what I heard was the case from previous cycles. So I'm not exactly sure how it works, but from my understanding, the rating spot is basically between Hikaru and Alireza Firouzja. So obviously Magnus, he's not going to accept it. Fabiano's already in, and I think from what I heard, maybe Anij Giri and or Wesley So has an outside shot, but it would kind of take Hikaru and Alireza sort of having a slumpish tournament. And it's going to be interesting just to see, because both Hikaru and Alireza are in this Isle of Man tournament, and they could play against each other. One of them could like lose rating and the other maybe stay the same or something like that. It's going to be interesting just to see how this plays out. What's also fascinating storylines, is that we're talking about Hikaru and Alireza, and neither of them are like full-time professional chess players, I don't think, because we know Hikaru is a streamer, and I'm pretty sure Alireza is still pursuing fashion school, and he's sort of making his like tournament comeback. Like, he hasn't played in a hot minute, so I think Alireza is off to a good start, if I remember correctly. Alireza Firouzja, he won in round 2. He was held to a draw in round 1. So 1.5. I mean, if you're not like at 0-2 or at half, you should be pretty chill. And I'm actually looking at the standings, which actually I should probably do at some point. So after 2 rounds, which I don't really take too much stock, I think someone at 1.5 has just about as good of a chance as someone at 2. Obviously, if it's something nitpicked, like let's say, okay, so like Fabiano's on like 2 points, and who's at 1.5? Who's like pretty strong? Who could be up there? Richard Rapport, say. I mean, it could be difficult if you're Richard and you're trying to catch up, and if you eventually play Fabiano and you have black, that might be a challenge. So I'm not saying it's completely equal, but I'm saying even Hikaru, he's at 1. If he goes on a hot streak, he could just finish in like number 2 or number 1. As I mentioned earlier, 2 years ago, Fabiano Caruana had 3 draws in a row in rounds 2 to 4 and still went on to tie for second. So, anywho, what was I trying to say? Yes, so the standings. So, there's 7 players at 2 out of 2. The 7 players are Alexander Predke, Erwin Lamy, and then this IM from, I think that's Kazakhstan, Ramazan Zlaumakhanov. Sheesh, I'm going to have to get these names right. Fabiano's at 2. Arjun Erikiai's at 2. Erikiai, by the way, he totally just... It was him, right? Yeah, he threw the Qatar Masters title down the toilet. It was tragic. It was one of those blunders to where I'm sure some 1,500 club-level players like, oh, I would never do that. How dare. And I mean, I'd be lying if I said that, like, I didn't have some of those thoughts as well. It was just, I think he played Rook H4, which just blunders Bishop F6, and then his opponent, what's his name? It's not Norbek Abusatorov. It's Norbek. I forget the name. He's another Uzbeki grandmaster, about 2650. He has wins with the two bishops, essentially. It was like a rook versus two bishops. Hard fought, hard defended. Then he just blundered, which was just tragic. But good to see him at 2 for 2, and maybe he'll snag a candidate spot. Obviously, it's very early, and he's going to have tough competition. So, Fabiano, that I am, Erwin Limey, Alexander Predke. Andrei Esipenko is on 2 out of 2, and Alexei Sorana is on 2 out of 2. Esipenko, if you remember from, I think it was 2 years ago, he had this great win against Magnus Carlsen, and it was a big deal back then, which, like, ironically, it's just funny to see. I don't know, just Magnus losing these games. I mean, a year ago he lost to Hans, and then in Qatar, excuse me. For some reason, I always conflate in my head. I conflate Dubai and Qatar. I don't know why, but anywho, Magnus is just losing these games, and it's like, I don't know, he's not world champion anymore, so honestly, what more can you expect from him? Is his just reign of dominance coming to an end? By the way, Fabiano, and I don't mean to like jump topics here, but Fabiano is 2801. Magnus Carlsen is 2827. So Fabiano is only 26 points from world number 1. However, we've seen this movie before. I believe like in 2015 or something like that, Kramnik was like 2 rating points away or something like that, and it just never happened. I mean, honestly, until he actually surrenders the world number 1 spot, I'm not going to assume that anyone is going to pass him up. But honestly, if any player at this point, it might be Fabiano. I mean, if he plays like he did in the Sinkfield Cup way back when, then he can do just about anything on the chessboard. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the tournament plays out. And actually, I have not seen the round 3 pairings yet. So I'm actually going to look at this live with you guys and maybe have some instant reactions to some matchups. I would imagine most of the 2 for 2 players are playing each other. There's 7 of them, so one of them is going to play someone with 1.5, I would imagine. But let's go to FIDE Grand Swiss. We can go to the website. And, I mean, I assume they have pairings up. I think they do. All right, round 3. So, Erwin Lamy, who's a Dutch Grandmaster, I believe. From the Netherlands, is playing Fabiano, Ergiaisi, Sorana, Esipenko, Predke. Firouzja against that I was talking about. Any, like, interesting matchups? I mean, not that these matchups aren't interesting. I'm thinking, like 24 hours ago, I was seeing Fabiano Caruana versus Hans Niemann, board 1. I was like, okay, here we go. Let's see. Like, who's Hikaru playing? Hikaru's playing Aryan Chopra. Chopra. Who is 21 years old, Indian chess prodigy, 2630. We'll see what Hikaru can do with the white pieces. Yeah, just a lot of... Hans is playing someone. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that. Yeah, we'll see how these games go. It'll be interesting to see, does anyone just start on 3 out of 3? Do all the top boards just draw and then just... It'll also just be interesting to see as the tournament winds down, since there are 2 candidate spots on the line and not 1. Like, if you're just on the outside looking in, like going to the final round, do you play it safe and maybe a draw like gets you in on some tiebreak technicality or something? Do you go all out? Especially if you're like Hikaru or Alireza Firouzja, do you maybe just, I don't know, take a draw, but you protect your rating potentially so you get the rating spot? Do you go all out, but if you lose some substantial points? I'm just asking questions at this point. I'm not exactly sure. And we will see what happens there. So that's about all I wanted to talk about. Again, I'm sorry if this episode was kind of a clunker. Again, it's pretty late for me, and I do need to get to bed. We're only at 20 minutes at this point, so thank you so much for listening or watching, however you consumed this content. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll be back likely with a Isle of Man update maybe the tournament will have concluded or be going into its conclusion by that point. And I'll see you for the next one. Bye, guys. Take care.